There are cases that divide opinions, cases where the justice system reaches a conclusion, but the questions never go away. In the early hours of December 9, 2001, a successful woman, respected by everyone around her and living what looked like the perfect life, was found dead at the bottom of a staircase inside her own home. Her husband called 911 and said it was an accident. But when investigators arrived, nothing about the scene felt simple. There was blood on the walls, blood on the ceiling, patterns that raised questions, and a scene that, according to some experts, didn't look consistent with a simple fall. Then one detail changed everything. Years earlier, another woman connected to the same man had also been found dead at the bottom of a staircase. The deeper investigators looked, the more they uncovered hidden behind what seemed like a perfect family. Debt, double lives, contradictions, and a story that became one of the most controversial true crime cases ever documented. Was it murder, a tragic accident, or one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in modern history? Today, we're diving into the case that inspired the staircase and trying to answer a question that remains unresolved to this day. What really happened to Kathleen Peterson? Kathleen Hunt was born on February 21, 1953, in Greensboro, North Carolina, and grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, on a residential street where kids ran from house to house all day, played ball in the street, and crowded onto each other's porches until late at night. Kathleen came from a middle-class family with strong values. Her mother's name was Veronica Hunt. Kathleen had two sisters, Candice and Lori, and a brother named Stephen. The four of them grew up together in that Lancaster neighborhood, and the bond between them never faded. From an early age, Kathleen was different from the other children, not in the sense of being distant or arrogant. People who knew her described her as cheerful, generous, and full of seemingly endless energy. The difference was her intellectual ability. At J.P. McCaskey High School, where she studied, she became president of the debate club and editor of the student magazine Generation. She was elected by her classmates as Girl of the Year and also received local academic recognition. Not satisfied with the school curriculum, she enrolled as a special student at Franklin and Marshall College, a nearby college where she took advanced classes while still in high school. She became the first high school student ever admitted under that arrangement. She graduated as valedictorian of a class of 473 students and was included in the Who's Who Book of American High School Students, a national publication recognizing the country's most outstanding students. In 1971, she entered Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. That same year, she became one of the pioneers in the university's engineering department, at a time when laboratories and technical classrooms were spaces occupied almost entirely by men. She didn't just enter. She completed a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and later earned a master's degree in mechanical engineering at the same institution. It was at Duke that she met Fred Atwater, a physicist. The two married in 1977 and moved to Maryland, where Kathleen began her professional career, and where their daughter, Caitlin, was born on April 27, 1982. The marriage to Fred did not last. In 1985, Kathleen discovered that her husband was having an extramarital affair, and they divorced. It was in Durham that Kathleen rebuilt her life after the divorce. She settled with her daughter in the Forest Hills neighborhood. Caitlin was 3 years old, Kathleen was 32, and her schedule never slowed down. Her career advanced steadily and methodically. She worked at Baltimore Aircoil, Pritchard, Merck, and eventually joined Nortel Networks, the Canadian telecommunications company that became one of the most valuable companies in the world during the late 1990s. At Nortel, she reached the position of Director of Information Services, managing projects that took her to countries such as Russia, Ukraine, Vietnam, Malaysia, and throughout Europe. She regularly received internal leadership awards. By 2001, her annual salary was approximately $500,000. At home, she remained deeply involved in her daughter's life, attended school events, cooked enthusiastically, and welcomed friends with the ease of someone who genuinely loved having people around. Her friends called her Superwoman, Outside work, she served on the Durham Arts Council board, supported the American Dance Festival and Carolina Ballet, and frequently opened her home for events and fundraisers. Durham knew her. She was a woman with real presence, not appearances. Caitlin grew up seeing her mother as the standard she hoped to reach one day. It was also in Durham that Kathleen met Michael Peterson. Caitlin used to play with the adopted daughters of a neighbor, Margaret and Martha, two girls being raised by a novelist who lived down the street and was going through a separation. Through the children, the two became closer. In 1987, the two families moved into the same house. 10 years later, in 1997, Kathleen and Michael married in the mansion where they lived. Talking a little about him, Michael Peterson was born on October 25, 1943, near Nashville, Tennessee. He graduated in political science from Duke University, the same university where Kathleen would later study, although the two never crossed paths there. At Duke, Michael served as president of Sigma Nu fraternity and editor of the student newspaper, The Chronicle, between 1964 and 1965. After graduation, he worked for the U.S. Department of Defense at a base in West Germany, researching arguments supporting deeper American involvement in Vietnam. That was where he met Patricia Sue Purdy, known to everyone as Patty. She was born on March 12, 1943, in Paris, Arkansas, the daughter of a military officer. She earned a degree in English from the University of Texas at Austin and later completed a master's degree in education. While teaching children of American military families in Germany, she met Michael. They had similar backgrounds. He was a civilian working for the Department of Defense, and she was a teacher on base. They married in 1966. In 1968, Michael was commissioned into the Marine Corps and served in Vietnam from August 1968 through September 1969. In 1971, he received a medical discharge with the rank of captain after a car accident in Japan, where he had been assigned as a military police officer following the war. The accident resulted in a permanent disability. The couple returned to the United States and settled in Durham, North Carolina. Their son, Clayton Peterson, was born there on December 3, 1974. Michael also attempted a legal career and attended the University of North Carolina School of Law, but never completed the program. Afterward, the family returned to Germany. Patty had secured a permanent position as a Department of Defense teacher, where she worked for 35 years. Their second son, Todd Peterson, was born there on March 14, 1976. While living in Germany, the Petersons became close friends with Elizabeth and George Ratliff, an American couple with two young daughters, Margaret, born in 1981, and Martha, born in 1983. George died in 1983 during a classified military operation. After that, Michael began visiting Elizabeth with unusual frequency, every night after dinner, helping with dishes, reading stories to the girls before returning home. He became the present neighbor, the trusted friend, the male figure the family had lost. Years later, some people close to them would say that Michael and Elizabeth's relationship seemed deeper than friendship, but that was never proven. On November 25, 1985, the nanny, Barbara, arrived at the house in the morning and found Elizabeth's body at the bottom of the staircase with severe head injuries. The children were still asleep upstairs. Michael had been the last person to see Elizabeth alive the previous evening. German police and U.S. military investigators concluded that Elizabeth died from a cerebral hemorrhage caused by von Willebrand disease, a blood clotting disorder. The case was closed. However, Elizabeth had left a will naming Michael as guardian of her daughters and leaving all of her assets to him. Years later, Elizabeth's sister, Margaret Blair, along with other family members in Texas, still questioned both Elizabeth's death and the contents of that will. To them, none of it fully made sense. Michael was still married to Patty at the time, despite how present he had been in Elizabeth's life. Always there helping, reading stories, and sharing meals. For Elizabeth's family, it felt strange that he inherited everything and received custody of the girls. Later, he divorced Patty, returned to the United States, and brought the two girls with him. They separated during the mid-1980s, and finalized the divorce in 1994. Despite the separation, they remained in contact. Their sons stayed in Germany with their mother and only moved to the United States years later as teenagers. Michael and Patty had been married for more than 20 years. Neither publicly discussed the reasons behind the divorce. What is known is that the divorce became official in the 1990s, and that Michael returned to America with the daughters of his deceased friend. In the United States, he essentially started over. He found success as a writer, publishing military novels based on his experiences in Vietnam. The books performed well. One of them, A Time of War, reached the New York Times bestseller list and was translated into 8 languages. He wrote other books and collaborated with journalists on biographies. He also began writing a weekly column for the Herald Sun, a newspaper in Durham, where he became known for direct and sometimes aggressive criticism of local police and District Attorney James Hardin. In 1999, after being married to Kathleen for 2 years, he decided to run for mayor of Durham. During the campaign, he publicly stated that he had received a Silver Star, a Bronze Star with Valor, and 2 Purple Hearts for his service in Vietnam. However, journalists investigated and could not find records of the Purple Hearts he claimed to have received. Michael later admitted that one of the injuries he had presented as combat-related had actually resulted from the car accident in Japan that happened after the war. That revelation destroyed the political campaign he had been running, and he lost the election. At that time, Michael's family with Kathleen included 5 children. Clayton and Todd were his biological sons, with Patty from Germany. By then, they were teenagers and had moved to the United States to live with their father. Margaret and Martha were Elizabeth's daughters, the girls he had been granted custody of after her death and later adopted. And there was Caitlin, Kathleen Zillen's only daughter. Kathleen embraced Michael's children as her own, and he treated Caitlin the same way. The family lived in a mansion of more than 7,500 square feet in Durham's most prestigious neighborhood. The house was beautiful, with a large office where Michael wrote his books, and the Peterson family frequently hosted dinners for friends and well-known people there. The couple was known around the city as one of its most sophisticated pairs. The New York Times described Michael as having a theatrical personality. Kathleen was described as a partner who matched him, energetic, loyal, and fun. But something remained hidden from almost everyone. Kathleen was the one financially supporting the entire family. Michael was unemployed, and together they had accumulated more than $143,000 in credit card debt. On top of that, Nortel, the company where Kathleen worked, and which had once been considered Canada's most valuable company, had collapsed after the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s. That meant Kathleen's job was under threat. By December 2001, the mansion on Cedar Street was quieter than it had been in years. Michael's sons were already adults. Martha was attending the University of San Francisco, Margaret was living her own life, and Caitlin was studying at Cornell. All 5 children were now living independently, and for the first time, Kathleen and Michael were alone as a couple. When they first moved in together, there had always been children in the house, noise everywhere, activities happening all the time. Now it was only the 2 of them. Out of all 5 children, Todd was the only one still living at home. On the night of December 8, 2001, Todd left the house around 10:20 p.m. with a friend, leaving Michael and Kathleen alone. According to Michael, that night he received exciting news. Someone wanted to adapt one of his books into a movie. He and Kathleen celebrated, had dinner, watched a movie, and later drank wine by the pool. But Kathleen had taken a prescription anti-anxiety sedative used to treat anxiety and insomnia. Combined with alcohol, the medication can intensify its effects and impair balance. Around 1:45 a.m., she went back inside the house, and Michael said he stayed outside. At 2:41 a.m. on December 9th, Michael called emergency services, saying he had found his wife lying at the bottom of the staircase. The call was extremely short. Only minutes later, he called again, demanding to know why the ambulance had not arrived yet. The first call came at 2:41, and the ambulance arrived at 2:48. but by then Kathleen was already dead. She was 48 years old. The scene the responders found was disturbing. There was blood on the staircase, on the walls, and even on the ceiling. The amount of blood, according to investigators' initial assessment, did not appear consistent with a simple fall down the stairs. Michael was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and had blood spatter on his legs. Outside temperatures that day ranged from about 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Shortly before 3 a.m., Todd, the only child still living at home, returned and found paramedics at the house. Investigators noticed that both Michael and Todd appeared shocked. However, Michael kept pacing back and forth. He mumbled something repeatedly about emails. Then he would walk into his office, use the computer, pick things up, and put them back down. Investigators found that unusual. Todd asked if he could grab a soda from the refrigerator. One of the officers allowed it. Later, that became a problem because the scene should have remained completely secured. In the days following Kathleen's death, the house became crowded. People brought flowers, food, cards, and bottles of wine. The staircase was covered with plywood, but behind it, the bloodstains remained on the wall. Caitlin, Margaret, and Martha returned to Durham as soon as they heard the news. 4 days after Kathleen's death, on December 13th, her funeral service took place at Duke Chapel, the same place where she had once studied and broken barriers years earlier. The burial took place at Maplewood Cemetery and was limited to close family. Michael attended with the children, and Kathleen, whose family was also there. At that point, the family still appeared united. Caitlin publicly defended Michael, but the investigation could not pause for mourning. From the beginning, investigators felt something did not fit. First, the amount of blood seemed excessive for a simple fall. There was blood even on the ceiling. Paramedics observed that some of the blood had already coagulated. To them, that suggested she had been dead for some time before the emergency call, possibly hours. Michael was wearing shorts on a cold night and had blood spatter between his legs. A partial shoe print was found on Kathleen's pants. Todd refused to speak to police when he arrived. Another detail stood out. On one section of the wall, investigators believed someone may have attempted to wipe away blood. During the following days, Michael repeatedly accessed his computer, which also drew attention. When questioned about that night, Michael gave 3 different versions of events. The accounts contained inconsistencies regarding where he was, what they had been doing, and exactly when Kathleen went inside. The autopsy performed by medical examiner Deborah Radish revealed that Kathleen had suffered 7 deep lacerations to the top and back of her head, along with multiple bruises and abrasions on her torso, the backs of her hands, and her arms. There was also a fracture in the thyroid cartilage of her neck. The cause of death was blood loss. The estimate was that she survived between 90 minutes and 2 hours after receiving those injuries. Her blood alcohol concentration was 0.07%, below the legal limit. She had also ingested between 5 and 15 milligrams of the prescribed medication. There were no skull fractures and no cerebral hemorrhage. The medical examiner's conclusion was direct. Kathleen died from lacerations caused by homicidal assault. On December 18, 2001, 9 days after her death and 5 days after the funeral, her husband, Michael Peterson, was arrested. On December 20th, a Durham County grand jury formally indicted him for first-degree murder. In front of cameras and surrounded by his children, he said, "I whispered her name more than 1,000 times and I can't stop crying. I would never do anything to hurt her. I am innocent of these accusations and I cannot wait to prove it in court." The family presented a united front. The obituary, published in the News and Observer and written by Michael, described Kathleen as having died in a tragic accident in her beloved home. He referred to himself as her best friend and husband. Standing beside him was also his ex-wife, Patty. When Michael was arrested, she was among the first people to publicly declare his innocence. Kathleen's grave at Maplewood remained without a headstone for 18 months. Michael never paid for one, and the reason was never made public. The headstone was only installed after Candace and Lori agreed to cover the cost. While the family believed it had been an accident, Durham police moved in the opposite direction. Investigators had the scene, the clothing, the computer, and what they began finding would change everything, including the opinions of the people who loved Kathleen most. In the months following her death, Durham police built the case piece by piece. Investigators seized the home computer and found thousands of images of gay male pornography and records of online conversations in which Michael sought meetings with men. In one message, he described his wife as an incredible woman, said he was very happy in the marriage, and identified himself as bisexual. Investigators identified and located Brad Holman, a male escort with whom Michael had exchanged messages and met. The legality of seizing the computer would later be challenged and eventually overturned. But at that moment, it fueled the investigation. The prosecution hired forensic analyst Duane Deaver from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the spy, to analyze the blood spatter patterns on the staircase. Deaver concluded that the patterns were consistent with repeated blows to a blood source and not with a fall. That analysis became the backbone of the prosecution's case, and years later would be proven fraudulent. At the same time, prosecutor James Harden learned about Elizabeth's death in Germany in 1985, a woman who had also been found at the bottom of a staircase with head injuries, whose last known visitor had been Michael. The prosecutor ordered the body to be exhumed. During this period, Michael remained free. He had been released on bail set at $850,000 in early 2002. He used the family mansion as collateral. Months passed, the investigation advanced, and the prosecution prepared for trial. Then, on July 1, 2003, 18 months after Kathleen's death, with the entire country watching, the doors of Durham County Superior Court opened for one of the longest trials in North Carolina history. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James Harden with support from Frida Black and Kelly Siegler. The defense was led by David Rudolph. For nearly 3 months, the prosecutors presented a case built on 3 pillars: financial motive, sexual motive, and behavioral pattern. The financial argument claimed the couple carried more than $145,000 in debt. As mentioned earlier, Michael was unemployed and depended entirely on Kathleen's income to support the household. But Kathleen's position at Nortel was becoming unstable because the company was no longer the dominant telecommunications giant it once had been. There was also life insurance. Kathleen had a policy worth $1.4 million, and Michael was the primary beneficiary. If she died, he would receive that money. Then came the sexual motive. Using the images and messages recovered from Michael's computer, prosecutors presented the material to the jury. They also brought in Brad, the man who had met Michael, and he confirmed the encounter, stating that he had been paid. Prosecutor Frida argued that she believed Kathleen discovered her husband's parallel life that night, his meetings with men. According to her theory, she found out through his computer because her own computer remained at Nortel. The prosecution argued she discovered the messages, the couple argued, and the confrontation escalated into violence. Finally came the pattern argument. 16 years after Elizabeth's death in Germany, prosecutors requested exhumation of her body. The remains were sent to the same medical examiner. Deborah concluded that Elizabeth's head injuries were inconsistent with a fall down the stairs. The amount and nature of the injuries pointed instead to multiple impacts from a blunt object. As mentioned earlier, Elizabeth's original cause of death had been cerebral hemorrhage caused by a clotting disorder. After the second autopsy, that conclusion was discarded. The cause of death was reclassified as homicide. According to the prosecution, that established a pattern. Both women had been found at the bottom of staircases. Both had head injuries. And the last known person to see both alive had been Michael. Michael was never charged in Elizabeth's death, but prosecutors used it to suggest a recurring pattern to the jury. According to prosecutors, the murder weapon was a handcrafted metal fireplace tool called a blowpoke. The item had originally been given to Kathleen's family by her sister Candace. She even brought her own blowpoke to court so jurors could see what it looked like. The blowpoke from the Peterson home had mysteriously disappeared. Prosecutors argued Michael used the object to strike Kathleen and later disposed of it. They connected this theory to blood evidence found near the doorway. The prosecution's first witness was paramedic James Rose, who responded to the emergency call. He told the jury that in 15 years of work and nearly 40 domestic fall cases, he had never seen that much blood from a staircase accident. He described Michael standing in a slightly bent posture over Kathleen and said there was blood on his hands, arms, and legs. He also noticed blood beneath her head had already coagulated and started to harden. To him, that suggested she had been dead for hours. A second paramedic supported that observation. Detective Art Holland, who led the investigation and had been at the scene that night, described Michael's behavior. He said Michael paced constantly, gave vague answers to questions, and repeatedly went into his office to use the computer. Blood spatter analyst Duane Deaver testified that he had worked more than 500 cases, written 200 reports, and testified in 60 trials. Based on that claimed experience, he stated that blood patterns were consistent with repeated blows and not with a fall. His testimony became one of the prosecution's strongest points and one of the defense's most heavily challenged. When Brad testified, he said Michael had told him he was married, spoke positively about his wife, and appeared happy in the relationship. It is important to note that there was no evidence proving Kathleen knew about Brad or Michael's private life. Then the prosecution introduced another witness who would later become a serious problem. Dr. Sami Shabani presented as a biomechanics expert. During cross-examination, David Rudolph produced a letter from attorneys representing Temple University, denying that Shabani had the affiliation he claimed. One of the credentials he testified under turned out to be false. Judge Orlando Hudson ruled that he had committed perjury and ordered the jury to completely disregard his testimony. It became one of the prosecution's most embarrassing moments. Years later, falsified expert credentials would become one of the arguments supporting a request for a new trial. The prosecution also called Barbara, the nanny who had discovered Elizabeth's body in 1985. She testified that there had been a large amount of blood at the scene, contradicting original U.S. military police reports that described very little blood. Another witness testified about spending an entire day cleaning bloodstains from the wall. Cheryl Appel Schumacher, a friend of Elizabeth's in Germany, testified about the circumstances surrounding her death and the Petersons' relationship with her. Margaret Blair, Elizabeth's sister and Margaret and Martha's aunt, confirmed that Elizabeth's will named the Petersons as guardians and stated the family had never accepted the circumstances of her sister's death. To directly challenge defense experts, prosecutors brought Dr. John McCrory, Professor Emeritus of Engineering at Duke, and Dr. John Butts, Chief Medical Examiner of North Carolina, and Deborah Radish's superior. McCrory concluded the injuries were inconsistent with a fall and consistent with impacts from an object with a rounded edge. John Butts became the prosecution's final witness, standing before the jury. He displayed a photograph of Kathleen's shaved scalp and counted the lacerations out loud with a pen. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 7. These, he said, were injuries that simply do not result from falling downstairs. The defense, led by David Rudolph, challenged every pillar of the prosecution's case and built its response around three major experts. Dr. Henry Lee, one of the world's best-known forensic scientists who had worked on the O.J. Simpson case, concluded that the more than 10,000 blood droplets moving in different directions were inconsistent with a beating. He argued that some blood on the walls could have been projected while Kathleen moved during the dying process. He even performed a live demonstration in court. Dr. Ferris Bendick, professor of biomechanics at George Washington University, created computer simulations showing how Kathleen could have fallen and suffered 7 head wounds. Dr. Werner Svitz, forensic pathologist, concluded that the injuries were more characteristic of impact against a flat, movable surface, such as stair steps, than from being struck with an object, although he could not completely rule out assault. The defense also presented the blowpoke, the fireplace tool prosecutors claimed was the murder weapon. It was later found in the garage by Michael's son, Clayton. There was no blood, tissue, or fingerprints on it. According to the defense, it even had spider webs on it, suggesting it had not been moved or used in a long time. Regarding Elizabeth's second autopsy, the defense challenged the entire process. David argued the body should have been examined by a neutral pathologist in Texas and not by the same examiner who had concluded Kathleen was murdered. The judge allowed the evidence anyway. None of Michael's children testified. All were present in court supporting him. Margaret, Martha, Clayton, and Todd stood by their father. Patty also remained by his side and lent him $168,000 to help pay legal fees. She attended court every day. Caitlin, Kathleen's daughter, did not testify in the criminal trial. However, the defense read part of a text she had written before Kathleen's death, in which she said she felt grateful to Michael for bringing happiness back into her mother's life. During closing arguments, Frida held up a folder full of gay pornography images found on Michael's computer. She told the 12 jurors she did not intend to offend anyone, but referenced what Brad had testified they planned to do together. Then she placed the folder on the courtroom railing, hit it with her hand, and said, "Filth, pure filth." She built the argument that Kathleen would never accept that her husband was bisexual, and that it was precisely this argument, this discovery, this humiliation that led to the fatal confrontation. She also shifted the focus to Michael's identity as a writer. She said, "We are not dealing with an ordinary person. We are dealing with a fiction writer, someone who knows how to create a fictional storyline." She ended her argument with a direct provocation to the jury. She said, if jury believed this accident theory, he would also have to believe that Duane Deaver is a liar. Years later, it was proven that he truly was a liar. And that line from Frida took on a meaning she certainly never intended. Defense attorney David Rudolph was the last to speak to the jury before they went out to deliberate. Frida had chosen to lean into moral judgment and emotion, while David relied on the structure of the law. He built his closing argument around a single concept: the burden of proof belongs to the state, and the state had failed to meet it. He pointed out at least 10 failures in the prosecution's case: the absence of the murder weapon, the absence of Michael's DNA on Kathleen or on the walls, the absence of Kathleen's DNA on the computer or on Michael's keyboard, the absence of any witness confirming that a real argument ever took place, the contradictions between forensic experts, the credibility of Sammy Shabani being destroyed, and the exaggerated claims of Duane Deaver. He also spoke at length about the alleged murder weapon that was found, but as I mentioned before, nothing was discovered on it. There were no traces of violence that proved it had actually been the weapon used in the crime. He argued that Michael and Kathleen had a happy marriage, that his bisexuality was not a secret to the family, and that the entire trial had turned into an exercise in public shaming disguised as a criminal proceeding. David and Michael's entire legal team were highly confident. But after 14 hours of deliberation spread across 4 days, the jury found Michael Peterson guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the verdict, Michael's 2 adopted daughters cried. Michael turned to them and said, "I love you. Everything will be okay." Kathleen's daughter, Caitlin, released a statement through her attorney saying she was grateful that justice had been served for her mother. Kent, Kathleen's sister, stood outside the courthouse and said she felt relieved, but not satisfied. David, the defense attorney, immediately stated that he would appeal. He said the war was not over. The prosecutor said they were very satisfied that at least this chapter had been closed for the family. In 2006, the North Carolina Court of Appeals rejected Michael's challenge by majority vote. The decision was not unanimous, which still allowed him the right to appeal to the state Supreme Court. In November 2007, the Supreme Court upheld the conviction. His ordinary legal appeals were exhausted. For all intents and purposes, Michael would serve a life sentence. However, in 2008, a series of investigative reports by the News and Observer exposed systemic irregularities in the SBI Forensic Laboratory, the State Bureau of Investigation of North Carolina. The reporting revealed a pattern of falsifying and omitting evidence in dozens of criminal cases. Attorney General Roy Cooper opened an independent investigation. The results directly impacted the Peterson case. Duane Deaver, the prosecution's main forensic witness, was suspended and later fired in January 2011. The official report concluded that his work was among the worst performed in decades at the laboratory. It was proven that Deaver had lied to the jury about his credentials, claiming he had worked on 500 cases, when in reality, he had written only 47 reports. He had also manipulated experiments to produce results favorable to the prosecution, and this was not limited to the Peterson case. Deaver had falsified evidence in 34 cases, including one that sent an innocent man to prison for 17 years. Once considered the state's star analyst, he was exposed for omitting data and inflating results. This collapse of scientific credibility in the state system, and not just Michael's defense strategy, ultimately forced the system to grant him a new trial. In December 2011, the judge ruled that Deaver had given materially misleading and deliberately false testimony. After 8 years in prison, Michael was released on a $300,000 bond and placed under electronic monitoring while awaiting retrial. Defense attorney David Rudolph, who had represented Michael in the first trial, returned to the case after the new trial was granted, working without pay. In 2014, however, he stated publicly that he could no longer afford to continue without compensation and withdrew. The court then appointed public defender Mike Cloninger to take over the case. The retrial was repeatedly delayed over disputes about which evidence would be admissible in a second proceeding. Without Deaver's testimony, without the computer messages whose seizure had been ruled illegal, and without Elizabeth's death being used as evidence, the prosecution's case was substantially weaker than in 2003. In 2016, on the eve of a critical hearing, public defender Mike Cloninger suffered a severe stroke and became incapacitated. David Rudolph offered to return, but Michael chose not to delay the hearing and instead allowed another attorney from the firm, Mary Judy Darrell, to handle the case alone. Then, in February 2017, Michael, now 73 years old, and once again represented by Rudolph, chose to enter a legal mechanism called an Alford plea, a form of American law that allows a defendant to plead guilty to a lesser charge without admitting to the crime. The argument is that the available evidence would be sufficient for a jury conviction, regardless of actual guilt. Michael entered an Alford plea to the reduced charge of manslaughter. He was sentenced to time already served, 8 years, and was released. During the hearing, Kend, one of Kathleen's sisters, addressed the court in a prepared statement written over 10 days. She dismissed the Alford plea with a phrase that became widely known. She said that for her, it was simply guilty, and no legal wording could change that. Kathleen's sisters never wavered in their conviction. From a legal standpoint, the case was closed, but the central question of the case, what really happened on the night of December 9th, was never definitively answered. And there was a third theory that neither the prosecution nor the defense had presented at trial. In 2003, T.E. Lawrence Fowler, a Durham attorney, Peterson neighbor, with no connection to the case and also an experienced hunter, began independently studying the autopsy photos. Something about the lacerations on Kathleen's skull caught his attention. He brought forward a hypothesis to the police that Kathleen may have been attacked outside the house by a barred owl. While reviewing the SBI evidence list, he found something that had been kept out of public view: a microscopic feather and a fragment of tree branch. They were embedded in a clump of hair torn from the root, found in Kathleen's left hand. The prosecution had previously stated that no feathers were found. A new examination of Kathleen's hair in 2008 revealed another microscopic feather. In other words, there were now 2 microscopic feathers. Lawrence's theory is the following: while moving outside the house, from the pool area toward the entrance, Kathleen may have been attacked by a barred owl, a common bird in Durham that mistook her hair for prey. this attack would have caused the head injuries. Panicked and bleeding, she would have run into the house toward the staircase and fallen at its base. The blood pattern, the splatter, and the scene would represent the moment she had not yet lost consciousness and was still struggling for her life, in pain and trying to get back up. In 2023, Lawrence endorsed a book titled Death by Talons, written by Ty Smith, which develops the owl theory in greater detail, arguing that the attack began outside the house and continued inside. Specialists in birds of prey who were consulted over the years have offered differing opinions. This theory was never presented in court, because when Lawrence approached David in 2003, the case was already in its final stages, leaving no opportunity to introduce new evidence. In the years that followed, Michael's legal team chose to focus their appeals on Duane Deaver's perjury, which was a stronger legal argument. When a new trial was finally granted in 2011, the unusual owl theory began to emerge as a possible line of defense, especially given the absence of a murder weapon that could be definitively linked to the crime. The alleged iron blow poke mentioned by the prosecution was never found in a condition that indicated violent use, despite exhaustive searches. In that context, Michael's defense found an unlikely ally: biology. Even so, Michael chose to enter an Alford plea in 2017, and the case was closed without any court formally examining the theory. Michael later described his reaction upon seeing a photograph comparing the talons of a barred owl with the lacerations on Kathleen's skull, saying that if it had been presented to the original jury, it would likely have created enough reasonable doubt for an acquittal. Shortly after Michael's arrest in 2001, a French film crew gained limited access to the family and the defense team. Over more than 600 hours of footage, they followed the case from the beginning of the investigation through the verdict. The resulting documentary, originally aired on French television in 2004 under a title roughly translated as Suspicions, was released to American audiences as Death on the Staircase, and later re-released internationally by Netflix as The Staircase. The series became a landmark in the true crime genre and received updates over time, with new episodes added in 2013 and 2018, following the case through to the Alford plea. The documentary also produced an unexpected development. Sophie Burnett, the French editor of the project, worked remotely in Paris, while Jean-Xavier de Lestarade's team filmed in Durham. Over months, she watched hundreds of hours of footage of Michael, the grieving husband and present father, a man mourning his wife's death. She came to believe he was innocent. After the 2003 conviction, she contacted him, initially through letters that eventually evolved into a relationship lasting 13 years. She traveled to Durham 17 times to visit him in prison. When he was released in 2011 under electronic monitoring while awaiting retrial, their relationship became public. Sophie appeared alongside him and his family during one of the hearings filmed for the documentary she had helped edit. The plan was that once fully free, Michael would move to Paris to live with her. However, after the Alford plea in February 2017, Michael was released in May of that year, and the relationship ended just days later. He remained in Durham, and Sophie remained in Paris. The 13 years of letters, visits, and plans did not survive contact with real freedom. In 2019, Michael independently published his memoir titled Behind the Staircase, where he described the relationship in detail, confirming that the plans had been serious and that Sophie had been a support during his years in prison. Whether the relationship influenced the documentary's editing, and therefore public perception of the case, was never definitively established, although Sophie and Jean-Xavier have always denied any editorial interference. In 2022, HBO released an 8-episode dramatized miniseries also called The Staircase. Michael publicly criticized it, calling it homophobic, and claiming that specific scenes, including one in which Kathleen discovers pornography on Michael's computer, were fabrications contradicted in court. In the HBO version, Sophie is portrayed as having suppressed unfavorable evidence against Michael. Sophie described the portrayal as unfair and false. James Xavier de Lestrade said he felt betrayed by Antonio Campos. Sophie later said the only positive outcome from the series was the friendship she formed with Juliette Binoche, the French actress who portrayed her. In April of that year, the miniseries premiered on Netflix and quickly brought renewed attention to the case. Regarding Kathleen's daughter, in 2008 she filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Michael. The case was settled, with Michael agreeing to pay $25 million. In practical terms, this meant that any significant income he earns is subject to enforcement in favor of Kathleen. For this reason, his memoirs and other books published after his release were independently released, with profits reportedly donated to charity. Kathleen was the only one of the 5 children who permanently broke ties with Michael. His biological sons, Clayton and Todd, as well as his adopted daughters, Margaret and Martha, maintained their support for him throughout the proceedings. Today, Michael is 82 years old and since April 2024, no longer lives in Durham. He moved to Reno, Nevada, describing the change as refreshing. He continues to deny any involvement in Kathleen's death. Clayton, the eldest son, lives a private life in Maryland with his wife and supported his father throughout the case. In 1994, when he was 19 and still in college, he planted an explosive device in a university administrative building in an attempt to create a distraction while stealing equipment to forge identification documents. The device did not detonate, but investigators found additional explosive materials among his belongings. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and had already served his sentence by the time Kathleen died. Todd, the youngest son, was for years one of Michael's strongest defenders, but later changed his stance. In 2021, he publicly accused his father of killing both Kathleen and Elizabeth. A separate and more recent family conflict concerns the death of Perry, the mother of the 2 boys, who died in July 2021 from a heart attack at Duke University. Todd claimed Michael watched her suffer and delayed calling for help, while Clayton gave a different account, saying Michael alerted the sons and they called emergency services. This claim was never investigated criminally. Margaret, one of Elizabeth's daughters whom Michael adopted, is now 44 and works in the film industry in California. She continues to believe in Michael's innocence and calls him her father. Martha, 42, lives in Colorado and works as a psychotherapist, maintaining a private life. Both returned to using their mother's surname, Redliff, instead of Peterson. Kathleen, now 44, is married with twins. She lived in London while completing a doctorate in law and later returned to Durham. She attended every day of the trial, hearing all the evidence, and said that she now knows what happened to her mother, although she has not disclosed details, stating only that moving forward is what her mother would have wanted. Kent, Kathleen's sister, always found the case deeply suspicious. She was actively involved until the Alford plea in 2017, after which she withdrew from the public eye, though she never changed her conviction. In the French documentary, she turned to the camera and accused the filmmakers of constructing a narrative that forgot the victim and focused only on the accused. David Rudolph, the defense attorney, continues to practice law. In his words, the Peterson case was the most devastating experience of his career. The 2003 conviction left him in a deep depression. Over time, he shifted his practice, alongside his wife, a former journalist who covered the case and later became an attorney. Together, they now focus on wrongful conviction cases and exonerations, helping individuals seek accountability for lost years. He also runs an art gallery and still believes Michael is innocent. Prosecutor Frida Black, known for one of the case's most memorable lines, did not live to see the Netflix miniseries. After being dismissed from the prosecutor's office in 2005 and accumulating 2 DUI convictions in 2012 and 2015, a welfare check was conducted in 2018 after she was not heard from for several days. She was found dead in her apartment, dying from end-stage liver disease caused by chronic alcoholism at age 57. This year marks 25 years since Kathleen's death, and the central question remains unanswered. What really happened that night? The prosecution believes Michael struck his wife after an argument. The defense argues she was injured in an accident and died after falling down the stairs. The owl theory proposes a third possibility that was never proven or ruled out. Beyond reasonable doubt, the justice system did not find the truth. It only reached the end of a process. What actually happened to Kathleen that night and early morning remains unanswered to this day. This case really stuck with me. I'd really like to know what you think, because honestly, I don't know either. I really don't. I just find it strange that both Kathleen and Elizabeth died at the bottom of a staircase, and that Michael was the last person to see both of them alive. To me, that's the strangest fact of all.